Let's be honest, we're being sold to constantly. But who do we actually listen to? Today, we're going to tear down everything you think you know about influence and uncover a pretty surprising truth about what really gets us to, actually do something.
Okay, so think about it for a second. The last time you bought something or did something because someone recommended it, was it some big shot celebrity in an ad, or was it, a friend, a family member, someone you really trust? Just hold that person in your mind for a bit. They are the key to this whole thing.
To see how this all plays out in the real world, we've got to talk about MV1 Canada. Here's a company with a product that could literally change people's lives, but they had basically no money for big, flashy marketing. They were a real David facing off against an automotive industry Goliath.
And their product? The MV1. This wasn't just another van. It was the first vehicle ever built from the ground up, right from the factory, to be wheelchair accessible. This made it way safer and a whole lot more affordable than the usual retrofitted vans. Seriously, it was a total game changer.
So, since they didn't have a ton of cash to burn, they had to be clever. First, they went grassroots. They drove an MV1 clear across the country, meeting people, talking to the community face to face. And the response was amazing. So they thought, okay, let's take this online. They hired a team to find all the top social media influencers to get the word out to millions.
And here's where the story takes a turn. If you looked at the usual numbers, the campaigns were a smash hit. The media buzz was huge. People were talking. But the sales? Oof, almost zero. All that noise, all that chatter, it just wasn't turning into actual sales. People were talking, but nobody was buying.
You can just imagine the team, right? Scratching their heads, trying to figure this out. They'd done everything right. They had an incredible product, they had a passionate community behind them, they even had national media attention. So what was the missing piece of the puzzle? Why wasn't it working?
Well, the answer starts to take shape with this quote. It's all about refusing to be defined by a simple score. And that, right there, was the exact trap that the entire marketing world and MV1 had fallen into.
So back in the 2010s, this thing called social scoring was all the rage. You had platforms like Klout that would literally give you a score on how influential you were online. And marketers went nuts for it, chasing people with the highest scores. But here's the problem. They were measuring the wrong thing. They were measuring how loudly someone could shout, not whether anyone actually listened. They confused a big audience with a real, trusting relationship.
And that's when the MV1 team had their big aha moment. It was a total epiphany. They realized they'd been looking at the whole thing backwards. The real power isn't with the person shouting the message, it's with the customer and what's going on in their life at the exact moment they hear that message.
This idea has a name. It's called situational influence. And it's actually pretty simple. It just means that how open we are to a recommendation depends entirely on what's happening in our lives right then and there. I mean, think about it. You're way more likely to take a friend's recommendation for a pizza place when you're actually hungry, right? It's the exact same principle.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Look at how MV1 started breaking it down. You might think a wheelchair athlete is the perfect customer, right? But hey, if they're already happy with the van they have, that's a big negative. But wait, what if that same athlete lives in the city where parking is a nightmare? Suddenly, the MV1's smaller footprint is a huge plus. See? Same person, different situation, totally different result.
This insight basically splits influencers into two totally different groups. You have your macro influencers. They're like a megaphone. They can shout a message to a massive audience. And then you have micro influencers. They're more like a trusted friend whispering advice right in your ear. One is for getting your name out there, the other is for getting people to actually do something.
So what did they do? They flipped the entire script. They stopped chasing the big names with the big follower counts. Instead, they started with the customer. They worked to understand their lives, their needs, their situations, and then they figure out who those people already knew and trusted. It was a complete reversal of the old way of doing things.
And just how much of a difference does this make? Well, a Telenar Group study found you are 14 times more likely to buy a new phone if a friend has one. Not 14%, 14 times. Let that sink in. That's the incredible power of personal trust.
That's it, right there. That is the power of a micro-influencer. It's the difference between a shout and a whisper. True influence isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the most trusted voice, speaking at the exact right moment.
So it turns out we've been measuring influence all wrong. The old formula was just wrong. It's not about reach. The new formula, the one that actually works, it's context plus trust.
Which brings us right back to that person you were thinking of at the beginning. Now that you know all this, who are they? Who are the real micro-influencers in your life? Not the celebrities you follow, but the people whose trusted whisper could actually make you change your mind. The answer is probably a lot closer than you think.